Hello, I Dr. Vijay Chandra Jadala welcomes you to VC Tech Education. Today I am going to discuss regarding exception handling. What do you mean by an exception? How to handle an exception? Except clause try. Finally, clause used as undefined exceptions. So all regarding the exception and exception we are going to handle. Actually, what do you mean by exception handling? If in a program, if there is some error, then what will happen? That error will be displayed on screen, or it will come to come out of the program. So by handling the exception, it will not work only that part of the module of the program, and remaining all the program will be executed by using an exception. Errors in Python program. In general, we can simplify the errors in a program into three different types. One is compile time error, runtime error, logical error. Compile time error. There are syntactical errors found in the code due to which the program fails to compile. For example, if you forgot the colon. So the errors are broadly classified into three. One is the compile time errors, runtime errors, and logical errors. Compile time errors, that is the syntactical errors that you will found in the code due to which the program will be failed. The example, you will forget the colon, that is nothing but a compile error. Runtime error, when PVM Python virtual machine cannot execute the bytecode, it flags runtime error. For example, insufficient memory to store something, it is nothing but a runtime error. Next comes to the logical error. These errors depict flaws in the logic of the program. The programmer might be using a wrong formula, or the design of the program itself is wrong, that is nothing but a logical error. So here the program x equal to float int enter a number, y equal to float int enter a number, z equal to x plus y. The average of two numbers is z. This is an example program. Then regarding the exception, so an exception is a runtime error which can be handled by the programmer. So if there is an error at the runtime, that can be handled by using the exception. The programmer can guess an error and to eliminate the harm caused by the error, that is an exception. All exceptions are represented as classes in Python. The exceptions which are already available in Python are called built-in exceptions. So here the exception is nothing but to avoid the runtime error, a programmer will handle the situation that is called as an exception. The programmer will guess an error to eliminate the harm from error caused to the program. He will use the exception. All exceptions will be represented in the form of classes in Python. The exception which are already available in Python are called built-in exceptions. The base class for all the exceptions is base exception class. The subclass exception is derived from exception class. The subclass standard error and warning is derived. A programmer can also create his own exceptions, are called user-defined exceptions. So exceptions here is shown in a graphical hierarchical model, that is base exception, there is standard error and warning, arithmetic error, assertion error, syntax error, type error, end of file error, runtime error, import error, name error. Then warnings or depreciation, deprecation warning, runtime warning, import warning. So these all are the different exception classes in Python. Exception handling. The purpose of handling errors is to make the program robust. When there is an error in the program, it will display an appropriate message to the user and continue execution. To handle exceptions, the programmer should perform the following three steps. Step 1, where there may be possibility of exceptions, should be written inside a try block. Try syntax try colon statements. Step 2, the programmer should write except block where he should display the exception details to the user. So except exception name colon statements. So this is the general syntax with the step 1 and step 2 procedures in the exception handling. Step 3, the programmer should perform clean up actions like closing the files, terminating, and any other process which are running. The statements inside the finally block are executed irrespective of where there is an exception or not. Finally, statements. The complete exception handling syntax will be in the following format: try colon statements except exception 1 handler 1 exception except exception 2 handler 2 else statements finally statements. Now we are going to discuss regarding the try block. A single try block can be followed by several except blocks. Multiple except blocks can be used to handle multiple exceptions. We cannot write except block without a try block. We can write a try block without an except block. So this is about that. That means we should use the try block for the exception block, but we can write try block without exception block. Else block and finally block are not compulsory. There are other blocks in exceptions, that is else block and finally block. When there is no exception, else block is executed after try block. Then finally block is always executed to close the exception. So here mainly there are 4 blocks. One is try block, else block, except block, and finally the final block. Try block, except block, else block, and final block. Try block is we can write try block is mandatory, whereas except block can be there or not. Using try block we can use the else block, and final block is there to close the exception. So final block will always executed. Next, types of errors, that is arithmetic error, which represents any type of exception. Arithmetic error represents the types of exception. All exceptions are subclasses of this particular class. Assertion error, raised when an assert statement gives error. Attribute error, raised when an attribute reference or assignment fails. EOF error, end of file error, raised when input function reaches end of file condition without reading any data. Floating point error, raised when a floating point operation fails. Generator exist, raised when a generator close method is used. IO error, raised when an input or output operation failed. It raises when the file opened is not found when writing data disk is full. Import error, raised when an import statement fails to find the module being imported. Next, index error raised when a sequence index or subscript is out of range. Key error raised when a mapping key is not found in the set of existing errors. Keyboard interrupt raised when the user hits the interrupt key. Name error raised when an identifier is not found locally or globally. Overflow error raised when the result of an arithmetic operation is too large to be represented. This cannot occur for long integers. Runtime error raised when an error is detected that does not fall in any of the other categories. Stop iteration raised by an iterator's next method to signal that there are no more elements. So all these are the different errors. Next is syntax error. Syntax error means it will have the spelling mistakes or some other things that comes under the syntax. Sorry, the way which we have to keep the way which we have to keep the steps, if we didn't keep in the order, that comes to the syntax, as well as at the time of compilation some format is not as per the rules, then it comes under the syntax error. Syntax error raised when the compiler encounters a syntax error. Import or exec execution statements and import and evaluation functions may raise this exception. Indentation error raised when indentation is not specified properly. System exit raised by the sys.exit function is applied to an object of inappropriate data type. Type error raised when an operation or function is applied to an object of inappropriate data type. Value error raised when a built-in operation or function receives an argument that has right data type but wrong value. Zero division error raised when the denominator is zero in a division or modulus operation. Exception handling syntax error. Try date value input enter date except syntax error print invalid date entered else print you entered date. So this is about the exception handling. Next comes to handling input output error. Try name equal to input enter file name f equal to open name comma in single quotes or except IO error print file not found comma name else n equal to len of f dot readiness print n in double quotes has n lines f close. So handling multiple exceptions. Here multiple times we can use the exceptions here, except type error, except zero division error. So try we given the try block and except block we used 2 times. This is about the multiple exceptions. This program you can check in the practical session. Next, except block. It can be written in various formats to catch the exception which is raised in the try block. We can write except block with the exception class name as except class name. We can catch the exception of as an object that contains some description about the particular exception. So exception we can use the catch. We can catch the object by accept exception clause as obj. To catch multiple exceptions we can write a multiple catch blocks. We can also use a single except block and write all exceptions as a tuple inside the parenthesis. So this is the format except opening parenthesis exception class 1 comma exception class 2 dot dot dot. How many exceptions you want to give, so many exceptions you can give. To catch any type of exception, we can write except block without mentioning any exception class name as except. The assert statement is useful to ensure that a given condition is true. If it is not true, it will raise the assertion error. An assert condition comma message, that is the syntax. If the condition is false, then the exception by the name assertion error is raised along with the message written in the assert statement. So this is the example which we given for the sake of the assertion error. You can check in the lab session. User-defined exceptions. The programmer creates his own exceptions are called user-defined exceptions or custom exceptions. Since all exceptions are classes, the programmer is supposed to create his own exception as a class and make this class as the subclass to built-in exception class. When a programmer suspects the possibility of exception, he should raise his own exception using raise statement as raise my exception in single quotes a message. The programmers can insert the code inside a try block and the catch exception using except block try colon code except my exception as me colon print me. By this, we completed today's session related to the error handling, where we discussed regarding the different blocks which will be used in the error handling, that is try statements, except statements, and finally block, try block, except block, finally block, else block, and even we discussed regarding the catch block. So all these are used for exception handling. Exception handling is majorly used to handle the exception so that the program will not show the error at runtime or will not come out of the programming of, and by using exception only that part of the module will show the error in the exception, and the next remaining programming concept will as usual executed. So this is all about the exception handling in Python. Hope you all understood well. Thank you. Thanks a lot.